Segregation in schools in the mid-1900s. All schools in America were segregated until the 14th Amendment made May 17, 1954 about civil rights was passed. These civil rights would grant every person in America citizenship, equal protection, and rights, whether given by law of blood or by naturalization. The Supreme Court case that justified this movement was Brown versus the Board of Education. Reason being because of forced segregation, unfair wages, refusal of schooling, and forcing to wear a badge of inferiority. And one of its decisions was to not force people of color into underdeveloped and under-resourced color-designated schools, and which slowly desegregated to where we are now in 2021.
But although this was a huge step in the right direction, it would take a lot more than a court order to change people's views on racism, or at least not yet. In the ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, although semi-effective, the court order did have faults. The Chief of Justice, Earl Warren, never explained how they would execute desegregating schools. Earl also forgot to mention or explain why state-sponsored segregation was not allowed, and why it was not okay. Another problem is that although in the same school, there would still be social segregation for students, example being different assignments or less friends than other students. The first school to ever desegregate was way before the amendment or the court case. The school was in the northern part of America called Lowell High School. The first known colored student to attend there was a girl named Caroline Van Vronker in 1843. But the first high school to desegregate after the ruling would come much later at a school named Clinton High School. 12 African American scholars registered to the school on August 20th, 1956, which caused controversy to spark because changes were being made all around the country. Some will protest peacefully, but sadly the majority did not. This is the reason why when the 14th Amendment came out, not all colored people were willing to integrate. A lot of people of color also had low self-esteem due to learning in segregated environments. When being integrated, students either felt happy to be there, discriminated by inside or outside factors, or a mix of both. Gail Jenkins, a civil rights activist, felt a mix of both. Gail was a student at Bogalusa Junior High School in 1967, which at the time had just newly started making changes. How the publisher from the Library of Congress described how Gail felt when interviewed was, he had one foot in each world, but was increasingly alienated from both. Gail was judged by the black community because they believed, considering he transferred to an all-white school, Gail thought he was all that, but they did not know that he was outcasted at school. Before Gail went to junior high in 1967, the congressman issued the Southern Manifesto in 1956. It declared, "We pledge ourselves to use all lawful means to bring about a reversal of this decision, which is contrary to the Constitution, and to prevent the use of force and its implementation." Meaning, they wanted to reverse integration and revert to the way it was. But as you can see, luckily, it backfired. In 1964, when things were still out of hand and schools kept making excuses for why they were still segregated, the Civil Rights Act was signed, which allowed the government the power to desegregate schools with no questions asked. And the way they would desegregate schools was by denying federal funding, which discriminated on the basis of color, race, religion, or national origin. And by 1968, in Green versus County School Board of New Kent County, they ruled that any school still segregated must be broken up immediately, and schools that desegregated but still segregated students treated them differently would be examined to see what to change. Schools in America were segregated throughout the 19th and 20th century, but when people started sticking up for themselves, we see the outcome in the present day, in which outcome being one in particularly, no segregated schools. This was achieved by many factors. Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, the 14th Amendment for Civil Rights also made in 1954, Green versus County School Board of New Kent County made 1968, and honorable notices. The biggest examples of major contributors to this movement are Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and many more. Thank you for your time.